Hello,
Give me a second.
testing. Justin,
Yeah, I'm here. Looks like my camera's having issues, though. I'll be back in 30
say something.
seconds.
Hello,
Give me a second.
testing. Justin,
Yeah, I'm here. Looks like my camera's having issues, though. I'll be back in 30
say.
seconds.
Probably not.
Back
Well,
better than
it
ever.
had a delay for me, but I guess Justin is gone now. Um, I think he'll be back soon. If anybody is out there, this is I'm Jahan Trembach, CEO of Althea, and I also do good amount of technical work as well on it. Although Justin is the CTO. He uses Linux, and
You're gonna blame Linux
tends
for
to have
this
a lot
again,
of
Jahan?
problems with his
Again?
camera and audio
Wait, can you
setup.
not hear me?
So let's see.
Oh man, this is.
Basically, we want to open it up for questions. Any questions that people have. So what we were thinking is instead of we kind of did this a little bit more spur of the moment. So we're thinking we could just there's a chat on YouTube here, and you can actually just put your questions in the chat. And that we'll see those and then kind of answer them as we go. And is Justin back? Justin messaged me. He said he's back. Justin, say something.
Yeah, I'm here. I think it's working. Okay. This is a problem with trying to start with 2 video calls.
I can't hear Justin. So sorry. I'm just trying to get Justin's audio working here. His video. There he is. I see him. Say something, Justin.
I am now speaking words.
No, I can't hear you. We got to get you a Mac.
No, I'll
He hates
never
it.
use a
He
Mac.
hates when I say that.
It seems like my voice is getting to the stream. You're just not hearing
hear
it
you,
for some
Justin.
reason.
Let me unpause. Oh,
It seems like my voice is getting to the stream.
it is.
Hearing it for some reason.
Yeah, it is. It is, but there's a delay of a few seconds.
No, you're watching the live stream, Jahan.
So it's very difficult to carry on a conversation. Um,
Let this be taken as a lesson
oh,
to everybody.
oh my God.
Technical problems in video conferencing will never all be solved. And in the year
Justin, can you
2050,
hear me?
we will still have overcomplicated teleconferencing systems
Justin, can you hear
nobody
me?
understands.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, I can hear you now. So the issue was that there's like a console, a control room console in this thing, and for some reason, it started with everyone's volume turned all the way down. Anyway, we're back. Justin's here. Okay, Justin. Liz is saying
Much
that you hear.
hilarity.
Yeah. So basically, if anybody has technical questions, then please put them in the chat. It's on the YouTube page. Also, you can tweet them at us, and you probably know our Twitter handle, but it's Althea.org. So one word, at Althea.org. And check the Twitter as well for the questions. But I think that probably what we could do is if we don't have any questions coming in immediately, we could just sort of give a brief overview of the of Althea, how it works. And so basically, let's see, I'm logging into sorry. Anyway, so basically, the Althea is a faster, cheaper, decentralized way to get internet access, and I think it's good to start with an overview of, and this might be, I don't know if this is maybe way too basic for some of you or what, but do it anyway, I guess. It's good to start with an overview of the internet and how the internet works. So basically, the internet is a collection of networks, and it's obviously it seems pretty much uniform to us using it. So you don't perceive that it's a bunch of different networks, but it is. And the different. Okay, I'm on Twitter. I see the mentions now, so you can tweet at us if you want to. The different. Oh, thanks, Liz. Also, the difference between networks is pretty much obscured by the internet, which is protocols for going between networks. And the individual networks, what they are usually are either what's called backbone networks, like tier 1, or regional networks, tier 2, or local ISPs. And the way the internet works right now, except for in Althea networks, but the way it has worked up to now, is that each network is owned by one company or one person. So you'd have like a tier 1 network, which has got you got a company like Hurricane Electric or Level 3 are examples of some of these companies. They've got these long distance fiber cables running under the sea, over the land, that kind of thing. And those guys run those networks, and then they connect to other networks. For instance, tier 2 networks, where they're regional, and they are like running maybe not really long distance, but maybe from somewhere like San Francisco to Sacramento, or Portland or something. That's more of a regional network. And then from there, what you connect to when you deal with your ISP is a tier 3 network, a last mile network. And so they connect to a tier 1 or 2 network, and they basically bring it from one of these longer fiber lines to your house, or from a data center to your house. And that connection from the last mile network's perspective, that connection is called the backhaul. So anyway, usually these Althea is for the we're not really addressing the tier 1 or tier 2 markets. It is for the last mile market. Usually, the last mile ISPs are owned by it's like the whole ISP is one company, and they kind of manage their networks. You pay them a certain amount of money, and they'll let you use their network. Althea is different though, because in Althea networks, so the tier 3 network was not necessarily owned by any one person. It can be a collection of different pieces of equipment owned by different people. And the key difference here is that instead of paying and then being given access to the network, your router gets access to the network as soon as it pays, basically. So it just buys bandwidth from another router on the network. So there's no setup, there's no needing to, there's no overarching management necessarily needed for an Althea network. So that's what's unique about it, and we think that's going to allow for a much more fluid kind of last mile network. So, for instance, if you're receiving access from an Althea network, you can then set up an antenna pointed at your neighbors. Your neighbors connect to you, and then they have access to the network too. We have some of that happening right now in our largest network, which is in Clatskanie, Oregon, where we have some relays that are supplying access to their neighbors. And then another thing is, more further in the future, we don't have any examples of this right now, but further in the future, that's also going to allow for something that's really exciting, which is bandwidth arbitrage. So if your whole town is connected to Althea, and or there's a lot of people, and let's say there's a part of the network where prices are more expensive. Maybe it's more, usually because it's more hops away from the backhaul or the connection to the tier 1 or tier 2 network. So it's a little further away. It's more expensive. Every router is kind of adding a little bit of profit onto it. So price is a little higher there. The bandwidth arbitrage, someone can come in and, let's say they figure out how to make a line of sight link with a piece of radio equipment to another part of the network where prices are cheaper. Then it's like all of a sudden, I forgot to mention, of course, Althea also has a self-organizing or quote unquote mesh routing protocol, which figures out the best paths for packets to take. And one of the things about it is that it's also will take price into account. So in that hypothetical bandwidth arbitrage situation, let's say there's two hills facing each other. One of them, the network is more expensive. One hill has 10 cents a gigabyte, the other hill has 20 cents a gigabyte. So make a connection between those. All of a sudden, as much traffic as possible is going to be routed through as much traffic as possible. Liz has just informed me that the camera is only focused on Justin, so we don't want that. But, okay, I think it's back to me now. So as much as possible, traffic can get routed through that link, and that's going to be, the person running that link is going to make some good money then, because they've actually figured out a more efficient path through the network. And so that's in the long term what we really are trying to create, is kind of a system where through the power of people collaborating and then also competing and trying to find the best connections to make in an area, you'll get a much healthier network versus the kind of centrally planned, centralized ISP models that we have today. And then I also wanted to mention briefly that let's check if anyone has any questions. Doesn't look like it. I'll mention briefly that I've been talking a lot about antennas here, and Althea it will work over wires and stuff, and we have connections that are over wires and some in different networks, but it definitely, the economic model of being able to set up an antenna, make a link, and kind of monetize that link, it does work better with radio equipment, simply because radio equipment is a lot cheaper. And it also requires no digging up of the ground, which is extremely expensive. So if you're going to lay wires, you kind of need like a 30-year plan to monetize those, whereas antennas, they can go up and bring connection wherever is most best, most profitable in our system. So those can do pretty good speeds too. I mean, there's radio equipment that can do gigabits of speed. Most of the stuff that we're using in our networks has a little bit of a longer range of a few miles, five miles, maybe 10 miles even sometimes. And it will do around 100 megabits, which is still much better than most people get from their cable or DSL internet these days. So I think that's the basic overview. And I don't actually see any more questions on Twitter or on YouTube, although we do have 5 watching, so that's nice. So I guess I'll hand it over to Justin. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah. I kind of wanted to go into why antennas or why fixed networks at all, because that's a question we get pretty often. Mainly because people hear the word mesh and they envision a purely device-to-device network where devices just talk to each other and it all works out. Unfortunately, as many past projects have discovered, there's a combination of physics, politics, and modern networking technology that essentially precludes that sort of design from being viable. And that was one of our biggest goals with Althea, is to find a design that we knew that we could make and we could make perform well. I actually have a blog post hopefully coming out in the next couple of days, fingers crossed on editing for that, that focuses on the fact that customers in our Cloud Sky test network now have better latency than I do with my gigabit fiber to the door. And that's in large part because we designed Althea not to try and get away from the fixed, screwed to the wall, aimed antennas, but instead to make maximum use of them and change the ownership model. So from the outside, Althea physically looks almost identical to what you would call a wireless ISP, making use of point-to-point gear and normal Wi-Fi routers. But from an actual network organization and design perspective, it has almost no similarities with a traditional wireless ISP because first of all, nobody actually owns all of the equipment. Each individual user owns the equipment on their own home, which I'll go on a little tangent and note that that's why most people don't have gigabit antennas in our networks, because they do cost several $100s versus $65 for that 5 mile 100 megabit antenna. And for
Um,
most people, it's a better choice to go with the cheaper one.
I'll jump in.
Um,
You can get them for, I think, a little bit, slightly under 100 for MikroTik wireless wires, but they use 60 gigahertz, which has a limited range. So those can go only about a mile. So
Yeah. The wireless wires are more limited. If you pay more, you can get 60 gigahertz antennas that are capable of gigabit, that don't have range limitations that are as bad or provide a 5 gigahertz failover. Generally, if you're willing to pay for it, you can buy whatever you want, including antennas that go like dozens of miles or do tens of gigabits. Um, but yeah, we're trying to make something that is cost effective, performant enough that people want to use it, and still decentralized. And I'll go over a little bit about how we achieve that in our next blog, in my upcoming blog post. And if we don't end up getting any questions, I'll probably end up going over it anyways, because it's been on the brain for the past couple of days.
yeah, we could also. I mean, we did leave this pretty open ended here. We could also go over. I think we were trying to figure out some kind of easy. If somebody, if people want to contribute code or anything, easy things to get started on. And that tends to be it tends to be a little trickier with our stuff because generally to kind of really contribute stuff, you need to be able to test it. We do have an integration test setup which uses a bunch of containers, but oh, sorry, I focused on myself again. But it's a lot of the stuff, you need several routers to be able to test, so it's a little trickier. But yeah, Justin, I was wondering if you could. We have some stuff on the crypto side though that's a little bit more self-contained that people would help with. But Justin, I was wondering if you had any suggestions on issues that people could work on.
Well, there are a ton of possibilities. Really, the most important thing is that somebody has to be willing to just make an attempt and ask me about it, because I've been very open to answering questions. But people often get nervous, like, oh no, am I supposed to know how to open this pull request or where to get started with this? Don't worry about that. Just go ahead and talk to me, and I'll be able to direct you. But some of the tasks that might be interesting would be a proper peer-to-peer authentication system for Rust. If you want to do something that's crypto related, but not necessarily working within an entirely within a cryptocurrency system, is that by default, most web request programs assume that you're going to use HTTPS or nothing. And that's a little problematic for us. We would like to have something that could just use the ED25519 keys that we use for WireGuard communication and authenticate the sort of post and get requests we make between devices more easily. That would actually be really cool. Some other tasks that might be easier to do and are still quite interesting is some sort of automated pricing scheme. So we've always wanted to have a pricing scheme that, for example, would take a look at the load average of the router and say, we're passing a lot of traffic right now. We're almost out of CPU time. We should start increasing the prices, or vice versa. They could say, hey, we're not really doing anything. We should be trying to make some money. Let's see if we can attract any traffic by lowering prices. We haven't really made too much progress on that, not because it's exceptionally difficult, but more because we've been occupied with trying to get everything to work and not catch fire and various things of that nature. And then as for some final cool like Rust or router related stuff, we've been looking into how to get netlink to work properly, because we have a lot of kernel calls. Well, not really kernel calls. We call out to the normal shell tools like IP. And I wish that we could make these direct kernel calls, as it would probably shave things make things slightly more efficient. And I think these are all good sort of self-contained tasks. Oh, yeah, of course, there is the big one, which is multi-cryptocurrency support. But that's not one task so much as it is a huge set of little tasks, which I'd be happy to direct anyone where to start there. But that one's going to require the most careful integration with the rest of the system. So if you want to go down that path, expect to be talking to me a lot about everything.
Another one that comes up is actually, and this, I was reminded of this by the automatic pricing plugin one. So the automatic pricing plugin, you're going to want to have a test network to try it out on, and you're going to want to be able to try in different hypothetical scenarios to see if the pricing is providing a benefit. The automatic pricing is providing a benefit. So you'd want to be doing that with a. So we have an integration test setup. Would use some containers I mentioned. So it may be an interesting task, not the pricing plugin, but would actually be to take a look at that and kind of turn that into a little bit more of a general purpose, like network testing environment. And the reason I bring it up is I know I've seen probably 3 or 4 different people when they get involved, and I did this myself, when they get involved in networking, will first of all make like a network test environment. It seems to be a popular kind of starter project for people, and you do learn a lot. And so what we use now, I think, is based slightly off of my original foray into that years ago. But it's yeah, so it uses like network namespaces. I don't know, maybe Justin's updated by now, but that could be a good one. And another category of things is actually on the blockchain side. So I can maybe segue to that right now. While we want to have multiple cryptocurrency support, and we try to encourage and support anyone who wants to add their cryptocurrency of choice in, we do have we also have a main kind of mainline thing that we're going to support. So for instance, EOS, some guys from EOS Detroit were working on getting Althea to work with EOS. Should probably get back in touch with those guys. I'm not sure what's going on with that project at this point. I know they had a lot of other stuff that they're working on, but we're very open to it in any case. We also get people who just like leave one comment on our YouTube video that says like use IOTA, and it's like, well, if you want to implement it. So it's really, that's what it's about. But our mainline cryptocurrency right now, what we're using is in Klatskanai, which is our main test network, an original network. It uses Ethereum, and the people there are depositing Ethereum to their routers, just the Ether currency. It's sort of volatile. It's up right now, might be down tomorrow. We don't know. So we're transitioning, and in our second test network in Medellin, Colombia, that is using XDAI. So XDAI is a like sidechain, proof of authority sidechain. That means that it's not mining. It's just like there's a bunch of like people whose names are on their website who are like running their blockchain, which is not very decentralized really. But for now, it kind of it's an expedient solution for us. Probably not going to get hacked anytime soon or anything, but it's not really decentralized. But what's cool about it is it uses DAI as its native token. So it's DAI is a stable coin, which is supposed to stay at $1. That's what we're transitioning to in the short term. And I'm actually just finishing up some code which automatically converts between Ethereum and XDAI in the routers. Longer term, we're going to set up a Cosmos zone. And so Cosmos is a project which basically gives you kind of a toolkit for making your own blockchain. And then it also has protocols for communicating with other Cosmos blockchains. And it's delegated proof of stake. So that means basically that people with the tokens, they can. I know Ethereum and everyone else is trying to move to this, but Cosmos is one of the first. People with the tokens can basically say, hey, I'm going to delegate these tokens to a given validator. And then validator is just someone who's running a server. And so you're not really voting on an approved list of validators necessarily. It's just that people can delegate their tokens to the validator that they want to delegate the tokens to. And That validator then runs the blockchain protocol. If they cheat or get hacked or have a lot of downtime or something, then what happens is that they get slashed, which means that that particular validator cannot be a validator anymore with those private keys. And then also, everyone who had tokens delegated to them loses like 5% of their tokens. And so that's a way that it means. So if you're someone who has tokens, then you are motivated to delegate them to somebody, and you're motivated also to make sure that who you're delegating them to is going to do a good job. So it's not just any random person. So you're making sure that the security is going to be good. And then in return for that, you get the transaction fees, and then also possibly inflation. So what we're going to do is have an Althea zone, and that's the name for like a Cosmos chain, and basically then we're gonna have tokens at some point as well, and the people who have the tokens can then delegate those tokens to validators, and they'll get transaction fees off the network. So it's a little bit like the people with the tokens can then be earning a little bit of money off the use of Althea in any Althea network. So that's pretty cool. And we have we know nothing. I'm not going to make any solid promises here, but we also have some plans which are underway for granting those tokens to people who start networks and people who contribute in other ways. That's the general idea. Now, the reason I bring that up is that one of the key elements that we're going to need to make that work is we're going to need a bridge, which can bridge DAI from Ethereum across onto our Cosmos zone. This is something that the Cosmos, the Cosmos Foundation and community are working on pretty hard right now as well, as to get that kind of bridge working. So I bring that up as a good project for someone to work on, because you'll probably get a lot of support, and we can introduce you to the people working on it at Cosmos. There's even Cosmos does have a granting program that their community grants to support development that they're starting. I think they're voting on kind of turning that on, so there could even be grants from them involved. But yet, it's also a feature that was really going to be very useful for us as well. So, it's another one. Hand it over to Justin again if there's anything.
Well, I think from the blockchain side, there's actually a very interesting technical discussion to be had on like the nature and limitations of channels. So when we started this, if you look at Althea's early material, we're talking about channels all the time. We are convinced that channel networks will save blockchain scalability or some sort of brouhaha. And it's actually kind of funny, because we got all the way through a channel implementation, and it was when we sat down to decide when to open channels, when to close channels, when was the best time to open a channel with a neighbor on behalf of a user, that we really started to notice the limitations. Now, first off, even when channels, even if channels were actually really great and perfect and had no flaws, this would still be a hard problem, because Althea is a fully autonomous payment system. And I actually don't know of projects that are actually doing completely autonomous payments, as in there's not a user around initiating it. It may be some machine is generating bandwidth and another machine is paying for it, and another machine's receiving payment. There could be no human in the loop.
Well, there's certainly
for
there's
entire
a lot
days.
of projects that do that. I shouldn't say there's no one else that does that. I mean, there's Live Peer for one, and certainly other ones as well.
Yeah, the big point is that it's less immediately human driven. So we have sort of a different set of problems where like the router needs to make decisions that last days, as opposed to a particular like operational event, which is, I suppose, what I'm driving at. So in the case of opening channels, you need to decide how much to deposit and how long that's going to last, and whether or not it's a good idea to take the capital risk and tie up the money. And this sort of gets into the problem. The problems with channels is that you can't really get away from the fundamental transaction cost on the blockchain, because if it gets to the point where it's so high that all operations need to be within a channel network, let's say there's an exchange in the channel network, there's every user is in the channel network, and you're just transacting within the channel network constantly, always. If transaction fees are $10, then you need somebody with an enormous amount of capital willing to speculate on who to open channels to make money. And they would need to deposit something on the order of $100 to get to 10% fees just blockchain wise. That's not including their own fees. So you need both a fast blockchain and some sort of channel if you really want to take scaling to the point where you could do, billions of transactions per second.
Channels will be they could be an operational like advantage because one of the things with channels. So right now, Althea routers actually just send each other transactions on the blockchain, and they calibrate it so that it's 5% overhead, and so that means they can do transactions every 20 cents or so.
It's $1 now because TX fees have increased over the past couple of days.
Yeah, there you go. So that's another issue there. So it could become, if the transaction fees go really high on Ethereum, then it could get to the point where it's like
outright untenable.
Too much.
Because $20 transactions.
If it's $20, if it's $20 instead of 20 cents, then you have a problem because then somebody can get $20 worth of bandwidth for free. They could be using the bandwidth, not pay for a month, and leave, and you never get paid for it. So that gets to the level where it's a problem. But yeah, the basic thing with channels is that they use gas to open and close the channels. And if it's if you're not calibrating it carefully, it's like you end up spending as much kind of in extra gas, like opening and closing the channels, as you would like just doing the transactions yourself. So that's a good number to keep in mind. And I'm surprised actually a lot of the channel projects that are out there on Ethereum, Counterfactual, Magmo, a lot of those, they don't actually really, they don't seem to have put a huge amount of thought into that, to be honest, which seems to be a pretty important consideration. They just kind of assume that it's going to be like, oh, you're going to do 1 billion transactions with this channel, and they're, $1 transaction fee divided by 1,000,000. It's like really small, So, but it's like, if you don't do 1,000,000, if you have $1, if the channel costs 20 times as much gas to open as a regular transaction, which is not uncommon, then you need to have at least like 20 transactions worth in that channel to even break even. So that's a big one to keep in mind. So, we did the channel thing. We figured out that like we realized like, look, fees are pretty low right now. It's going to be hard to figure out who to open channels with, this, that, and the other. And so we're going to keep it on chain for now, for simplicity. But even with the fees, a big advantage of the channels is that you kind of like don't need to hit the blockchain
exchange.
Yeah, you don't need it right now. The router has to verify. You have to hit the full node all the time to see is this transaction legit, and all that kind of stuff. With the channels, it's more like you can just you get a transaction from your neighbor. It's legit. It checks out. So that's a good one. The other thing is, you might be asking, what about the Lightning Network? What about channel hubs? A lot of stuff on Ethereum too, where they have even these virtual channels where they have one hub, and people. And this Plasma is almost like a channel kind of concept as well, I think. The issue with that is that actually under the I've always suspected this was going to happen, but like under the new FinCEN guidance, the U.S. government probably is looking like right now, and I'm not a lawyer, but it looks like they're going to consider people who are routing channel payments to be payment processors, which they kind of are. They're literally processing payments, and in a way that miners are not necessarily. They're really more directly kind of handling the money, even if they can't steal it. So that's a worrying thing. If we were to try to set up our own payment channel system or channel hub, we might have an issue where we're running that, and then we get, they come and say, hey, why are you not KYCing? Why do you not have this $1 million license you got to get, and all this stuff, So that could be an issue. So that's why our channel design has been neighbor to neighbor, so nobody's processing anybody else's payments. They're only ever dealing with their own payments, but yeah. There's other issues as well with even without the legal issues with a multi-hop channel system. The capitalization problems are not as difficult as they are. So with single hop channels, you have to decide, okay, am I going to put $10 towards my channel with Justin and then hope that I'm going to spend $10? What if I want to pay Liz and I don't have any money in her channel? Then I got to close Justin's channel, take some of the money out, put it in Liz's channel. Now I can send her money. It becomes a lot of decisions that have to be made, and we have to write the code to make those decisions. Not impossible, but it's probably a lot of work. So with the multi-hop channels, you can then say, hey, Justin is my channel hub. I only have a channel open to Justin, and then he's got a channel to Liz and whoever else, or to another hub who's got the channel to somebody else as a multi-hop Lightning Network thing. With that, though, even is like, let's say Justin is my channel hub, and I'm receiving a lot of payments. Justin's got to have money locked up for me to receive payments. He's got to have money locked up in my channel for me to receive payments. So the question becomes, how does Justin know how much money to lock up for me? Right now, the Lightning Network, I think, I'm not up on all the Lightning stuff, to be honest, but I think they still have it at a pretty low maximum payment amount. So it hasn't really become a huge issue for them, but it's like, yeah, you want to get paid out a lot of money from a channel network. Somebody has to have like locked that up on your behalf. So none of these problems are insurmountable, but they're complex. And so that's why we're on chain right now.
Yeah, so the point is the channels are a good optimization, but they don't necessarily completely solve a lot of problems. And in fact, if you use them without taking care to understand what it's going to cost to open, close them, what the real cost of locking up this money that you may want to send to somebody else is, you're going to end up spending more in fees than just straight up sending payments. Now, all that being said, the biggest advantage of some sort of payment channel system or payment network for Althea would be the ability to ride through short network outages. So let's say you lose access to the larger internet or some subset of the internet or just Ethereum nodes for a few hours. Right now, we'd be pretty doomed if that happened. But with the channel system, the source of truth for payments is entirely local. So you can just exchange payments back and forth, no problem. And we may end up implementing channels, if nothing else, for that ability.
Yeah. I'll also cover something briefly about I think that I didn't even think about this for a while, but like people may not realize it as well. But it's another reason that we're using Cosmos, or if it wasn't Cosmos, we'd use something else similar to it where we could have our own chain. There's a big advantage. I mean, so you might think, well, on Ethereum, the chain's already secure. There's already people mining it. It's like you just deploy your contract, you're good to go, really easy or whatever. The issue is that right now, 5% of the money in our networks going to Ethereum miners, with guys with GPUs. So nothing wrong with mining. I have some friends who mine Ethereum, but it's not really, they don't necessarily know about Althea. They don't necessarily care about Althea. They're just mining a blockchain. We're giving them 5% of the money in the network. That's like pretty steep. So now we could mess with the payment interval and use channel stuff, try to bring that down. There's different things we can use, but still going to be some percentage is going to be going to miners. With a Cosmos chain, or this would also hold with any other kind of sharded like sidechain kind of system. We can, like Polkadot would, I think this applies to Polkadot as well. There's some differences with Polkadot. I think you got to pay them a lot of money to have a Polkadot chain, whereas Cosmos you can set it up without paying anyone. But anyway, with either Cosmos, Polkadot, or any other of these projects, basically if we have our own chain, it's the people mining it are people who hold Althea tokens, the future Althea tokens, and they they can get that 5% or 10% or whatever it is, it ends up being in our system, and it's not just random. It's just not just random guys with a power plant filled with GPU chips or whatever that's getting the money. It's really it's really people who are invested in the ecosystem, who are supporting the ecosystem, and so that's kind of an advantage. So the gas fees, it becomes not as much of an issue for us to design around anymore. It really more becomes not a question of how much gas you're paying. It's more about blockchain bloat. So we might want to have channels in that scenario, even just to keep the chain size smaller and make it more easier to validate. But it does remove a lot of economic pressure of making transactions. So just wanted to mention that real quick.
Yeah, I find the whole sort of ecosystem here interesting because on one level, blockchains are programming tools that are looking for network effects. On another level, they're payment systems that are competing on fees and have now commoditized the ability to create a new payment system which also competes on fees. So the logical conclusion, of course, will be a universe where fees are quite low. Obviously, that's not happening yet because it's not really where the system is in its maturity. I'm going to be really interested to see what's going to happen in 5 years or 10 years. Does Ethereum make a concentrated effort to reduce fees? Do they leave them where they are? Do new chains come up entirely on the premise of your Internet of Things product shouldn't be losing a bunch of its transactional income to a chain? I find that sort of the long-term economics of that are really interesting.
I agree. Anyway, yeah. So if you feel moved to get involved in contributing with any of the various open source efforts happening, then you should get into our Discord room. We have a link on the website, but I think it's not extremely prominent on there. Let me get. I'm gonna make a link here that will not expire, and I'll post that maybe.
Speaking of, we have a question. Who is the best person to talk to about an auto pricing plugin? And the correct answer to that question is just to post your questions in our development Discord channel or the Bridged Matrix channel. I can get you either link depending on which one you want. It's really the same room. It's just accessible via Decentralized Matrix and Centralized Discord depending on your personal preferences. But yeah, if you post your questions there, we'll be happy to help you out. I'll probably take point on more of the router code related questions, Jahan, on the sort of blockchain and maybe network economic impacts.
I've also I've posted a link. Well, I'm about to hit enter on it. Posted a link to the Discord room. So in the comments on the video, and that shouldn't expire, hopefully. So, yeah, so you can get in that Discord room, and we have different channels or whatever, and there's development channel, and that's where a lot of the communication happens. So you can lurk there or ask your question, and we'll prioritize trying to get new contributors up and going. So, yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else that we should cover, Justin? Or
yeah. So obviously, there's an almost infinite selection of topics to talk about. So I think maybe next time we should make sure we accept questions a little bit earlier and see what people are interested in, because I would be happy to geek out for an hour or two about just about anything.
yeah, we didn't really do a lot of planning on this one, so we'll probably make this a monthly thing. We also have the community call, which is in I think 2 weeks. Don't quote me on that, but check the Twitter. That's more general. Deborah's going to be in there too. It's going to be more about networks on the ground.
Yeah, they won't let me really nerd out in the community calls. So
yeah, no. So yeah, that's a good one to attend as well if you want. And yeah, I'll have another one of these in a month. So we'll try to hype it a little bit more and get the questions in. So
if you think of any questions, send them to info@altheamesh.com, and we'll add them to our list.
Isn't it hello@altheamesh.com?
Yeah, it is hello@altheamesh.com. I am looking at an endpoint. Whoops.
Yeah, there you go. technical talk. I'll see you guys later.